Okay, let's move on and talk about MIDI. Now, before we get into MIDI, we need to jump backwards a little bit. And I want us to pick up where we left off when we talked about the history of digital audio. So, kind of where we left off there was Max Matthews, right? So, Max was working at Bell Labs. He went in there and he made the computer make some sound. Cool. And then we kind of developed digital audio from there. We've covered that. But when we're talking about the history of MIDI, we need to go all the way back to the first kind of electronic instruments. That is, instruments that were producing sound electronically. Now, those instruments themselves are not MIDI. MIDI didn't come till later. So I'm going to jump back a little bit before the invention of MIDI, okay? Just to kind of help us get into how MIDI came to be. Because MIDI, and we'll talk more about this later, but MIDI itself is a method for control. MIDI is control messages for sound making devices and some non sound making devices, actually. More on that later. So, first, let's talk about those devices that needed controlling, and then we'll talk about how MIDI came to be to provide them with some control. So, as we started to build, not we, not me, but as people started to build instruments, started to build circuits, right? Like once we started to play around with circuits as a society and figured out that we could build a circuit that made sound, then it wasn't too far off for people to start to try to develop musical instruments that were electronic. Okay? Now, the first real example of this, the first real successful example of this, we get in 1929, or actually that's when the patent was submitted, was 1929. So we probably developed it in 1928 or so, maybe even earlier. And this instrument is called the theremin. Now, maybe you've heard of the theremin. It gets used in old-timey scary movies all the time to be like the ghost sound, go woo. It's like the sound of a theremin. It's a pretty weird sound. But let's go to a new video and let's talk about the inventor of this instrument, Leon Theremin, and how this instrument works.